Now, at this moment, Russia is seething. Germany, under the new Chancellor Friedrich Merz, is breaking with tradition. Berlin is giving $5.65 billion of military aid to Kiev, maintaining strategic silence on the supply of the Taurus missiles, a missile with which Ukraine can hit Moscow. Now, the West's open war strategy has turned into a calculated silence, and Moscow is warning of a very dangerous escalation. So what's happening with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war this moment? All right, now to give us more perspective on this, we are joined in this broadcast by retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who is a military expert and also the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Colonel Davis, thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us here on Beyond. I want you to weigh in a little bit on what Donald Trump, the President of the United States, said while speaking with reporters at the White House when he was asked about whether the Russian President Vladimir Putin was being honest in the peace negotiations, where Donald Trump has now effectively given a 2-week ultimatum to the Russians and has said that if the Russians don't show their seriousness for a peace deal, then America could change the way that it deals with Russia. In your assessment, how differently would Trump approach the peace talks or the Ukraine war if the Russians don't show enough seriousness for a peace deal?
Well, of course, the devil's in the details, and what is the definition of a serious discussion? I mean, from the Russian perspective, they've been nothing but serious from day one. They've never said anything other than that they want a negotiated settlement, that they're willing to talk without negotiations, but they have been very, very clear consistently that for them to reach a negotiated settlement, the root causes of the war have to be involved, and they have very high standards for what they're wanting to meet. So I don't know where there's room for Russia to, quote, be more serious. And we also have history of President Trump. Look, I mean, he said he would have this resolved in 1 day if he came into office, and then it turned into 100 days. And then in the middle of April, he had his Secretary of State say that we are days away from walking if we don't get a deal. And then on May 4th, Trump said the same thing on a U.S. media. Now he's saying 2 weeks. So he's said this before, and those days continued to pass and turned into weeks. So we'll see what happens. But I just don't see that President Trump has much leverage to have anything different, because it is very clear the Russian side is not going to change their viewpoint because they have the dominant position. They have the leverage to compel compliance on their part, or they'll simply keep fighting. So I don't see much room for flexibility in this point.
Interesting. And also, I want you to weigh in on what the Germans are doing, where the Chancellor Friedrich Merz, he has of course had discussions with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Germany is giving the Ukrainians about $5.6 billion of military aid, and there is some strategic silence on whether the Taurus missiles are likely to be given to the Ukrainians to be used without any limit on its range. In your assessment, what's actually happening here? Are we looking at an escalation where Germany could be entering into this war without any limits with Russians?
I think Germany is playing a dangerous game here. They think that by being clever and coy and saying we're not going to specifically say what we mentioned, as though that would have any impact. If any kind of German munition ends up being used on Russian mainland soil and causes damage or destruction, it won't matter what you call it. It won't matter if you proclaimed it from the mountaintops or didn't say anything. Russia knows what happened, and they know that they got hit from it. And listen, we should look at this from two perspectives. One, this has virtually no chance to affect the frontline fighting in any way, shape, or form. There aren't that many Taurus missiles to have. I think I've seen the number of total of 200. The Russians have a very good air defense system. They've got years now experience in trying to knock down and take out with electronic warfare America, or the Western versions of long-range fires, etc. And none of that's going to make any changes. Why then would Germany want to risk escalating the war and to find out if the Russians are serious, that they would actually strike German targets if these munitions are used, when it doesn't even have a chance of affecting the war? I think that this is a gamble of the highest order that has no chance of success, but does have a chance of escalating the war, and it should be resisted strongly.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Colonel Davis, for joining us with that perspective there.